Mm.
So we're going to talk about personality change. What is that? We talked about this paper, and the we is a kind of fluid we because different ones of you take different modules. I'm hoping next year we'll have more continuity of the modules. But some of you, how many of you read this paper before when we were talking about it in relation to philosophy? I'll put up your hands again. I guess about half of you, right? Does that look like that? When I was saying to a couple of the people that came on early that when I first reread this paper, it didn't strike me very much. But then when I started to use it to teach, it just has so much to offer. And I feel like it's a new paper talking about it from the point of view of theory than when we were talking about it from the point of philosophy. But we'll see how it lands on those of you who, read that paper with me before earlier. So when we read it earlier, a group of you, and I think a lot of those people were gathered by Marvin in the little study group. Liz and Jim, and some of you met last night, right? In this little study group. And there was great interest in, well, what do we mean by change? And what do we mean certainly by personality change? And so we're going to be talking about that today. And there's so much in that. But actually, before we talk about it, I want to, in the interest of TAE or sensing into our thinking when we think about change, one way of thinking about it is, well, of course, as therapists, we want to help people to change. But then what do we mean by that? Another way of thinking about it is to sense into what that means for us. So I'd like to start that way and give you a moment to make this topic really personal. Not only how do we facilitate change, but what change means to us. So take a breath and let's ask that question together. And when I ask that question, it's always a new question. Have I changed? All the therapy that I've had and all the therapy through the years that I've facilitated, all the study, all of the experiences. There's some Lynn that I recognize in pictures of myself as a baby. I'm still that one, right? Maybe that one from before birth. Have I changed? Is there a Lynn that is a continuity? And then what has it been to change? What does it mean when I say, I really want to change? How have you noticed that you have changed through the years? And maybe think of one thing, let one thing emerge that has changed, or an experience of change. So either something that's changed in you or an experience of change. Hold that lightly and tenderly, this question of what is change for me? And maybe you can find a name for that experience of change, or that what has changed, an image. Unfold it a little more. What led to the change? How did you change? What was it like to change? Were there people that helped you to change, that you couldn't have changed without?
I feel a struggle. Are we supposed to talk? Are we allowed to talk? Are we supposed to talk? Is it time to talk?
Let's see. Let's ask. Let's ask them. Are you ready to have? Are you ready to have talk? I think they need another minute, Liz. I think you got that feeling when you started to speak, and people were still in there.
Right.
Yeah, focusing reverie. So, Liz, see if you could get a felt sense, because this is part of the training, a felt sense of the manner of experiencing, and see when you feel it's ready to speak.
It's ready to speak when I can't take the anxiety of everybody's silence.
Oh, so
And I've had enough. So stop.
okay. So anxiety of silence, which is a wonderful topic in and of itself. But see if you could, instead of paying attention only to your anxiety, to your body, see if as you look at the screen and look at people's faces and experience how they're experiencing with you, see if that changes that anxiety when you're sensing into the felt sense of the group. Does it do anything there?
I don't know what they're doing in there.
Uh-huh.
I wonder what kind of relationships do they have with whatever's going on inside of them.
Uh-huh.
It seems vaguely interesting, but I'm not sure.
Uh-huh. See, it makes you interested in what they're doing.
Possibly.
And then let's see if you can tell when they're ready for you to speak. This is a real focusing exercise, right? And the one that this is a focusing exercise. I'm using you, Liz, as my guinea pig here, but for all of us, this is one of the most important focusing on the us that we do, is that we, as therapists, get the felt sense of when the client is ready for us to speak. And that's very difficult. We have to get a felt sense of the silence, and then we have to deal with our own anxiety sometimes, as Liz does. Maybe we're going to help Liz here by raising our hands if we're ready for her to speak. Yes, I think not all of us, but we're as us, we're ready. So this is commenting on, I have to go back now to what we're speaking about, or felt sense of change in ourselves, if we've changed and when we've changed and how we've changed. Go ahead, Liz.
I have to remember that's why I have to jump in, because it's gone, you know, and if I don't grab it, who knows what it was. It, you know, seems to have floated into the ether.
Okay, it will come back. I have faith in that. Anybody else? What came to you about change?
I can say for me, it was really changes embedded in awareness of a situation that where I might have felt stuck or trapped or you know, entrenched in something that needed to move in some way. And
Mhm.
it wasn't until I could see, till I could have a different perspective.
Mm.
Sort of like Amazing Grace in a way. I was blind and now I see and now I can move. Yeah.
And were there people or events that helped you to
Yeah.
see?
Yes, there were therapists had helped me, a therapist in particular, and sometimes friends, and sometimes
Yes.
the interaction itself, as we've talked about,
Right,
uh,
right.
prompted me to experience
Yes.
situation freshly, so to speak,
Yes.
differently, in a new way.
Yes, 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 yes.
And I could move, and I could think of that as a change. I could make a change, a movement that's different
Life, yes.
than it was.
So it was the awareness, the
Yeah,
action, and the being caught in something, and then suddenly with the new awareness, there could be this ability to move.
right. Very much part of an interaction, though, that facilitated that.
Action, yes,
Seeing,
yes.
letting my perspective shift. Yeah.
For me, change is very fraught. I'm going to speak now because I think, I always get stuck on authority issues when I think about things here, which is interesting. It's always sort of an oppositional thing. And I feel as if I have definitely changed. But what's really inspired me to change was people in my life and readings who told me that I didn't have to change, because I never really wanted to change. I wanted everybody else to change
Yes,
and make things easier on me. And I resented the idea that I had to change. And
yes,
I've had people in my life, like therapists and even in different groups, who some people said I needed to change, but very influential people to me said, you know, you don't really have to change. And much later, I found a book by a Buddhist practitioner and that who's written a lot of books, Sherry Huber. And one book is entitled, There Is Nothing Wrong with You. And I've given a few copies to patients. And it talks about socialization and how, you know, you grow up thinking that there's something's got to be wrong with you. You don't really fit in. Obviously, you're all screwed up in some way. And that may not be the case. You know, there may be different ways of actually seeing that situation. So yeah, I think change is fraught. And I think a lot of patients come in and I have got to change, my life's got to, but I don't know that, you know, they really want to change. They want their lives to change. They want their situations to change. So yeah, I would say that acceptance of me when that has happened, you know, you're not really such a horrible person.
right.
Has allowed me to release a lot of tension and conflict and self-hatred and allowed me to develop in certain ways.
Yes,
That's the change.
yes, yes, yes. Thank you. That really says a lot. I want to point out, I'm sorry just then for leaving. I had to let somebody in. But my cat healer. um, that idea that what changed was a kind of release, and that the feeling that you're supposed to change can feel like you're not good enough, you're not right, and that you have to be different. And that, of course, Liz is pointing out, we all want everybody else to change so that they fit us better and our lives will change. it's rare to feel really from inside, especially if you're being told that you're supposed to change, that you really want to change. But then when Liz was told, well, you don't have to change, then it could change, right? Then it could change. That's so interesting, right? Going back, or we haven't really marked yet what Gene says in this paper, but let's do it right now. He says the two elements that people always point to about personality change is feeling or experience, and he is developing that to a manner of experience and to relationship. And in those two things, when Liz felt like she's supposed to change, the manner of experiencing was oppressive. In relationships, when people said, you don't have to change, you're okay, the whole experience, the manner of experiencing the change was different. And then it could be a release. So that really gave us a lot there. Anybody else?
Yeah, I was surprised because when I was looking for how have I changed, it's totally a bodily experience of, there are times now where I don't look for it, but I notice I'm in the flow, I'm in the zone and that for me is an immense inner space that seems empty, but it's not. It has a peacefulness about it. It has a clarity and focus and a quietness about it. And it goes. Mm-hmm. And then I let myself be surprised when it comes back, but it's a big change from certainly my anxieties when I was 25 years old or younger. Right. And I think part of that too is the two things that also came to mind was that just hearing what anybody has to say, including my own critical voices, as information, and becoming aware of how much I imagine in the stories I make up that are just illusions if I just stay with the information. And today I actually was working with a client and made a statement about myself because they were saying they're not enough. And I said, oh, that's funny. Sometimes I feel I'm enough to know I'm not enough. Mm-hmm. And that's a big change, because the core then is I am enough. And I can have all these other aspects that float through as you deal with life every day.
Right. So the change is a kind of accruing or developing this faith in this flow. And also what changes is your feelings about your feelings, that the not enoughness becomes enough to feel the not enoughness. It's interesting that for Liz, it was a release. For Arlene, it was a kind of bigger picture of a broader view that then could release her. And for you, it's sort of a development of a faith in your ability to have the feelings and hold them. Anybody else? I'll just take one more.
I have, Lynn, I just marvel at your ability to listen and retain and then reflect back like 3 people's comments. I've been doing Charlotte's 2-year training, and there have been so many shifts, and I feel that I'm more deeply myself, and that all the obstacles that were in the way of being as fully present as I could be and fully present with another person, that they've slowly, like in little, like been chipped away at, or like little layers have just been removed.
Mm.
And when you earlier talked about manner of experiencing, I had like an instant felt sense of openness in experiencing, and then little things that come in, like little barriers.
Mm.
So yeah, just yeah. I don't know if that makes sense, but
Yeah. Yes. That idea that you feel that the change is to feel more yourself. And that's so interesting, isn't it? I mean, that would give us a lot to focus on. To what do we really mean by being more ourselves? You know, that change isn't changing from this thing into that thing, but change is changing here to being more of that. And I think that's very much in the spirit of therapy, and in the spirit very much of what Jean is talking about, is that change is a development. And change from Jean's point of view, and many of you who have spoken also, little steps of change. I think about how different that is from what we're saying than the way it is in the movies. Did any of you see that movie? I couldn't remember the name of it, but it just came back to me, Prince of Tides. Did you see that with Barbara Streisand years ago? And there are so many movies about change and therapeutic change, but this one sort of typified it for me, where the change is this breakthrough of remembering trauma, and a catharsis and tears, and then some very dramatic thing with the therapist. I think in that they actually sleep together. Do they? Those of you who saw that?
Yeah.
I was thinking that it's such a cultural fantasy of how therapy works. And there are many other movies, maybe you might want to just say them, where therapeutic change happens with some dramatic breakthrough and some dramatic connection with the therapist, usually a very mutual moment. And then there's the change, and then the person is different. They've solved their problem. And I think that culturally, at least in the United States, I don't know how it is in other cultures, that's often what people expect change to be. And why isn't that happening, right? This breakthrough. For many people, it's the feeling that if I could just remember what happened to me, then everything would change. There's so much to talk about in that respect, but we don't have time to go into it now. But what Jean is talking about, and what you people have been talking about, is that change happens in little steps, and it has to do with an integration of insight and relationality. When Jean talked about how change is usually thought of, and he said, well, the two things that people cite about it is feeling. There's some feeling, and there's some special relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess the movies is that, the feeling, the dramatic feeling, right? And the relational breakthrough. But then Jean talks about, well, what do we really mean by feeling? And he develops that into this idea of feeling being, a manner of experiencing. And to me, that is just so profound. And when we think about, instead of the content, what we're talking about, we think about the manner of experiencing, it changes the whole ball game of what psychotherapy is. Let's just give us a moment to think about that. I'm just wondering if you were really struck by that introduction of the idea of a manner of experiencing. That did something for you. I'm thinking about how Jean talked about focusing as a little door, and then beyond that door, when you open the door, there's the whole big therapy process. Focusing isn't the therapy process, right? It's a little door into this big process of evolution, of development, of growth, of healing, of the way that a system changes to a world where we are change, a world where insight and experience are one system, right? And we can think about, see if this works for you. I thought of it this morning. Think about how theory is a little door into focusing, that's a little door into therapy. Could that be right? Or do you think of theory also as a door into therapy, into this big world of therapy? Maybe both. I was thinking it's a door into the door of focusing, because it's only when you're really focusing on theory, when you're taking it in and making it your own, and it's in your bones and it's being digested and it's coming out of your mouth in this digested way that, oh yes, you know this, right? That theory becomes a part of you and becomes a part of this entrance into this big, big world of the therapy process that's very mysterious. We can't pin down the process of change or the process of therapy. It's always mysterious. It's always beyond our conceptualization. And yet these concepts, like even the concept of the manner of experiencing, can bring us closer to it, can give us glimpses into it, can help us to navigate it. So the manner of experiencing, just going to say a little bit about what it means to me. It means to me that the content, the issues, the life experience, the circumstances, the problems, are not the most important thing there, but the way that we're experiencing those circumstances, problems, issues, past, trauma, relationship. And that all of us can have the same experience. And Jean makes a big difference between experience as a process and what we talk about, an experience. Let's say an experience of a parent dying when you're very young. And each person, it will be, of course, a different experience. And what changes often isn't the circumstances, but what changes, and we see this in focusing all the time and in our sessions all the time, is our relationship to that situation that changes. And some of you talked about that too. Our manner of experience changes, and it changes in this relationship, in this connection. When I'm always quoting Jean saying, our main job is to be the interaction that makes something better, makes something different, makes something able to be digested. So when I think about Jean saying, well, the two things are the relationship and the manner of experiencing that make for change. And then when I think about the relationship of these two things, wow, something sort of explodes, right? So if one factor is the relationship and how we're relating, and the other factor is the manner of experiencing, and we put those together, there's this whole world of how we are experiencing in the relationship and how this relational being together is shaping and forming an integral part of the experience. And it also means that what the therapist is experiencing, the manner in which the therapist is experiencing, is an integral part of what the client is experiencing, and an integral part of those issues that the client is talking about, the about. Let's just see if there's anything you have to say there before we continue. Let me just say one more thing, then I really want to hear from you. One of the things that Jean says in terms of the manner of experience that people have talked about, we had noted this the last time we looked at this paper, is the difference between merely talking about something and really experiencing it. The difference between the merely and the really. And Jean, I loved how he takes off on that difference between merely and really, and that therapy is about, or something about, making the merely into a really. And that's really what focusing is all about, right? Focusing is an art form, a skill set, a philosophical framework, a theoretical framework that helps us to understand what makes the merely talking about this, reporting it, saying it, joking about it, bemoaning it, complaining about it, the merely into really experiencing something so that it lands, so that it impacts us. So all of the moves that we learn in focusing are designed to make the merely into really. And then there are a lot more that are relational moves that help to make the merely into really. And I'm going to give you a little case example later about that. So now I want to hear from you.
Lynn, I would like to share that as you were talking first, about the theory being a door and then the merely and the really. I was thinking of my experience when I was at first I got into contact with Rogers, and when I read, but I didn't just read, but I really read and took it in my body when he spoke about really receiving the experience of the client. And when that went into my body and I could really feel that, it changed my manner of experiencing with myself, because then I could just, it was like, I can receive myself. I can be the interaction for myself that I'm needing for that change to happen. So it's that the theory was definitely a door for me, in the sense that it's allowed for another manner of experiencing my interaction with myself.
Yes, yes, yes. Thank you. That's so right. That there's also such a difference between merely reading something and really reading something, right? And the really reading something is definitely a doorway into a deeper experience and into change. So much change has happened for probably all of us and for the world in reading something that has been written, or hearing a talk, or watching YouTubes.
I don't know if I'm on track at this point, Lynn, but I guess what I'm looking at right now is how the listener facilitates the process and the focuser with their presence, and how different variations in the listener's ability to be there affect the quality, at least of my focusing. I don't know if that's even, maybe I just got kind of lost. But,
yeah, where did I think I said too much there, right? That you
no.
felt, but that seemed right on, Gray.
Okay.
That is definitely what Jean is talking about, that the way that the listener is present makes the difference in the experiencing. That the experiencing is the way that what is being talked about is received and held.
Yeah, and then my experience is that I, as the focuser, can be completely open to the person, to the listener, and to myself, as opposed to putting up these little blocks to protect or defend myself.
Right.
And then something can really emerge from that inner silence, Yeah.
Yes. That's one way that it can go, that the person being receptive can open up our ability to be with the inner silence. Winnicott talks about the importance of being able to be alone with another. And I think focusing really helps that, right? And the focusing moments in therapy, of course, the focusing oriented therapy isn't all focusing, right? There are moments of focusing in the therapy, moments when that focusing process of touching in happens, and sometimes a longer moment and sometimes a shorter moment of just touching in. But that experience is the experience of being able to be with yourself, with another, in such a way that yourself becomes richer and more accessible and more detailed. I love the way Jean talks about the qualities in the manner of experiencing. You remember that in the article where he talks about the immediacy of experience, and I wrote them down for myself so I wouldn't forget to mention them. The presentness, right? That the experience is right there, and the freshness of detail. So if we think about the difference between the manner of experiencing where we have this immediacy and where it feels right there in the moment, and where all of these details of enfolding are coming. The difference between that and the manner of experiencing where we're either overwhelmed or very vague or only in falling into one emotion, or cut off from ourselves, where something isn't coming to us. And of course, these are fluid, these manner of experiencing. Let's what you're saying, Gray, reminds me of what I sent you about what Jean says, that is put in such a nice way. And since we need to come back to where you are, maybe Jeffrey could read that for us. I'm thinking, Jeffrey, of that part at that longer part that I had sent in the notes, but I sent it to you just this morning on experiencing is a carrying forward. Could you read that for us?
Okay, yes, I've got it here. Explicating is a carrying forward, or?
No, it's the last, I think it's the last one that I sent, and I didn't send it to everybody.
And do you want me to read it from the beginning?
Of that part, yeah.
So it begins with, we tend to be so concerned with content.
Yeah.
Is that it? Okay.
We're just going to listen to this as a story because this isn't very theoretically oriented. This is telling us a story. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
We tend to be so concerned with content, symbolized meanings, that we sometimes discuss psychological questions as if personality were nothing but contents.
Let me just remind everybody that when he uses the word content, sometimes people draw a blank. What is content? He means the story, the situation, the what it's about in therapy, what the person is talking about, what we say about the person, right? They're a trauma survivor. They're suffering from addiction, depression, anxiety, they're in a bad relationship, whatever it is that is the about, that's what he means by content. I'm sorry, Jeffrey, go ahead.
Yeah. We forget the obvious differences which exist not only in what an individual's experience is at a given moment, but also in how he experiences. Thus, we ask a question such as this: what difference does the personal relationship make, since the individual can think and feel the same contents when he is alone as he can when he talks to another person? Often, a psychotherapist or any listener who wants to be helpful will feel that he must do something, add something, bring in some new content or insight so that he will be helpful and make a difference. Yet there is already all the difference between how one thinks and feels alone and how one thinks and feels with another person. The conceptual content may, for a time, be the same as the individual can think and feel by himself, but the manner of experiencing will be totally different. Consider, for example, the type of listener who interrupts with his own concerns and is inclined to be annoyed and critical long before he understands what is said. With him, my manner of experiencing will be quite constricted. I will think of less and feel less than I do when I am alone. I will tend to say what I must in round, general, swiftly finished terms. I will not tend to feel deeply or intensely or richly. Certain things will never occur to me when I am with him, or if they do occur to me, I will save them for a time when I am alone and I can feel them through without the constricting effects of his responses. We all know this difference between the manner of our experiencing with certain persons as compared to when we are alone. Similarly, there are others, we are fortunate to know one, with whom we feel more intensely and freely whatever we feel. We think of more things. We have the patience and ability to go more deeply into details. We bear better our own inward strain when we are speaking to this person. If we are sad and dry-eyed alone, then with this person we cry. As if we are stopped by our guilt, shame, and anxiety, then with this person we come to life again, inwardly, as being more than these emotions. If we have showered disgust and annoyance on ourselves to the point of becoming silent and deadened inside, then with this person we come alive again, as well as we tell this person some old, familiar, many times repeated story. We find it richer and freshly meaningful, and we may not get all the way through it for the many facets of personal meaning which now unfold. Experiencing with us is a change. In psychotherapy, therefore, the situation is not that first we figure out what is wrong with an individual and how he must change, and then somehow he does it. Rather, his experiencing with us is already vitally different with us than it previously could be. From this different experiencing arise the solutions of his problems. The changes are already occurring as he speaks. Our responses as verbal symbols and as events interact and carry forward his experiencing. Our gestures and attitude, the very fact that he is talking to us, the differences which each moment he makes to us, all of this interacts concretely with what implicitly functions in him, his felt experiencing. Continue?
No, we'll stop there. Thank you a lot. Thank you so much, Jeffrey.
Sure.
I thought you could take all that in because it's just told to us as if he's saying it. And we can all identify with that, right? We can all think of times when we're trying to say something to one person and it feels like we have to hide it away or nothing comes. And the person that just brings the more of everything. And I feel like I am both people, right? Do you feel like that? That you're sometimes the person that the other gets stopped by or closed down by, and at other moments you're the one that your way of being with the other person brings them alive and brings the subject alive. And I think that in this question of how the feeling aspect and the relational aspect come together, there's this big question about how can we be this way that he's describing, that the other person is going to feel the really rather than the merely. And that changes moment to moment. And I think as therapists, we're in the back of our minds saying, oh, this is sort of dead. How can I be to make it more alive? Or how am I being here with this? What is it for me? And finding ways to bring ourselves alive and bring ourselves into the immediacy, into the presentness, into the richness of detail, so that we can be those facilitating others. What came to you when Jeffrey was reading that? I thought of it right in that moment, Gray, because of what you said about the focusing partner making something deeper for you.
Yeah, there are people that you can just develop a deep resonance with. So it's almost as well, he says we're interaction, and that's really felt. And it's an immediate experiencing this union and this freedom and space in the other person's presence. But it's not just that, it's this synergy between us that's really so profound and so beautiful.
Mhm. And we're just as much interaction in the instances where that doesn't occur, right? When we think, oh, this client is such a difficult client. I am bored when I'm with this person. This person is a boring person, or this person is so troubled, nothing can be done, or this person can never focus. And we say that to ourselves. Sometimes we say it to our supervisors or to our friends. This very difficult client. But what we're really meaning there, sometimes we don't even know we're meaning it, is a difficult interaction. The person is being that way with us, right? They may be a different way with a different part of us. They may be a different way with different people. It's the interaction that's boring or too troubled or can't focus, rather than that it's the client. But that's a big thing to take in, that it's not separable. Can't say, oh, the problem is the way I'm being, or the problem is the client. The problem isn't separable. It's the interaction that is this always moving, changing flow of both feeling and relatedness, and how they come together, how they are together as one.
Charlotte said that when you had her on, that it's a concept that's hard to wrap your head around initially. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
The fun thing I'm kind of getting, there's like a little moment that's like, oh, you used the word move earlier, like what move can I do now? But the move, you already made a move just in asking what move.
Yes.
Like we can't help but always already be the moving.
Yes, exactly. Yes, a lovely point. That it isn't, I mean, there are many things that we learn as focusing oriented therapists that we could call moves. Like, for example, in terms of presentness, the experience that Jean will ask the client, is that here right now? The person is going on and on about their financial worries or their fight or their depression, and Jean will say, is that here right now? And that's a move, right? It's a way of bringing it into the present. Or in terms of richness of detail, Jean might say, oh, what was that like? How is that for you when blah, 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 blah? What's in that pond under the surface of all of this? There are all of these things, and there are some of them we know and some of them we don't know. So Jean will, that will be a move to help the richness of content. But what Jonathan is saying, that even to think about, for it to occur to us, how I can ask that question is already a move. It's already something in us saying, oh, I'm ready for a deepening or an enlivening, and I can do that. Or can I do that? Can I experiment? Can I play here? Can I be open to possibilities here? Or am I stuck in what Jean calls the frozen hole, or the structure bound? And the therapist, Jean, is saying that in his theory, the stuckness, the structure bound, is the problem that he sees, that the biggest problem that we face as humans. And that structure bound is like, it's already closed in this frozen whole thing, rather than being a permeable, flowing kind of interaction. And so we get stuck in the structure bound when I feel like, oh, I have to do this, and I have to just receive that, and just that feeling of being captivated by the structure of the relationship, or the structure of my expectations, or the structure of what I feel I'm supposed to do. And then even it occurring to us, oh, I could say this, or be this, or think of it this way, or be interested in that, is already a change. And that change makes a change in the dynamic between us, even before the other person says something.
How do
The
you feel
playful thing-
safe?
Oh.
Sorry, go ahead.
The playful thing for me is why I brought it up. Maybe for you, Lynn, when you end up making a move, it's from this not structure bound place. But I know sometimes for me, like it's not less like, oh, how can I be more? It's like, oh, this isn't working. I need to make a move here. But that is the move that I just made, which is reinforcing the structure bound, even though we're trying to not structure bound.
Yes, 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 yes. Again, it's the manner of experiencing. And to really take that in, the difference in the manner of experiencing, that's what we're trying to impact in ourselves and in the other. The manner of experiencing a should, or the manner of experiencing an expectation, that's what is up for grabs here.
One thing that I think about, I was just sitting here thinking of all things of Freud's civilization and its discontents, and how there's something, and I tell me if I'm totally wrong about this, but there's something about, if only we can kind of think of things correctly, or open up in some way, we'll get to more and better. And I feel like there's a minimization of danger and resistance, and people who don't really want to say what's going on, and have reasons not to want to say what's going on, taboos, and that the goal is not necessarily explicitly or implicitly to be so open, because it's scary, and bad things can happen when you say the wrong thing, and even think the wrong thing, and even feel the wrong thing.
Mhm.
So I was thinking about that, and I was thinking about because of some TV show I was watching where they were teaching men how to change a diaper, and I was thinking about getting really basic, and how from the time we're little, we're told we're very dirty and smelly, and we have to be cleaned up all the time. And I think that's very pervasive. And am I making any sense here?
Well, yes, that you're questioning, and it's of such a basic question. Is it always better, right? When Jean says to be the interaction to make it better, is it bettering? Is it forward moving? to be open. Maybe in all situations it isn't, but you're also asking, Liz, even with ourselves, is it better to be open? Are there dangers where we should be closed?
Well, even if it's better in the long run, I was thinking also, I have a friend, Jim's friend also, who wrote a piece. She's a writer, a very, very analyzed writer, who wrote a piece a long time ago, an essay about what patients don't say to their therapists. And it was amusing and all, even like, I hate your shoes,
Yeah.
your shoes look cheap.
Mhm.
I don't know if you're the right therapist for me, because,
Right.
just even before you get to the deep stuff, it's like, who is this person in the room with me? And
Right.
how much do I even want to say about how I feel about that? And mutually, the therapist thinking, God, you're boring. I know you're boring because of stuff, and you're really not boring, if we're really authentic and all that, but still you're boring. And just how much,
Right. Two things there,
yeah,
Lynn.
yeah,
Right? Two things.
yeah.
One thing is a sort of basic question about, is openness, is life made of forward movement? And Jean is coming down very strongly on in that assumption that life wants more life, and that might be interrupted, it might be perverted, it might be all kinds of things. It might not be. Also, self-regulation and mutual regulation and dissociation is absolutely necessary for us. We don't always say the things in the moment because there are dangers. There is, all of that is true, but that basically what we want, what our organisms want, is more life, what life wants, and that we find the way to make it safe, to make it right, to be able to think the things, to be able to say the things. So that's on the one side. And you may not agree with that. And Freud didn't agree with that. Freud thought that, and many people don't agree with that the destructive instinct is just as strong as as life wanting more life, right? But focusing oriented therapy, I want to say, is an enactment of that assumption, and that we are testing it out moment by moment by moment. We're not just taking it on faith. We're saying, in this moment, can something be made safe to say? So that's the one point I wanted to respond to. The other point is that, yes, there are all of these implicit things that aren't said. And I will often ask in a training, what couldn't you say to your therapist? And it will be things like, your shoes. I hate. One supervisee left me for another supervisee because my handbag looked shabby. Other supervisor had a very expensive, spiffy handbag, and that was very symbolic for her. But it took a lot for her to tell me that. But there are all kinds of things like that. Jean is saying that experience is an interaction of feeling and symbolization. And we would read another quote there, but I don't know if I want to take the time to do it now, but you'll read it by yourself, where he talks about how there's so much that we're experiencing implicitly, but that it's always unfinished. But to give birth to something, it needs to be symbolized in words, in gestures, in actions, that the so that the explicating of the implicit, the unfolding it, the verbalizing it, is carrying it forward. It's a manner of experiencing. And this is so basic to focusing oriented therapy that I just make sure you take that in. The act of explicating the implicit is in itself a carrying forward.
Lynn, I wonder if I can make a point, because I think this concept that we're talking about so applies to me personally. That is, the person who interrupts or is ready to jump in, and then in other situations sits back and takes that therapist role. And I think it's so situationally bound, and it's person bound, and it applies more than to the therapy situation that we're talking about, but applies to all of life, and all our interactions with people. And it depends on timing, mood, as Jonathan says, but it's not quite conscious. It's unconscious, and that makes it unpredictable. Except we get into patterns. That is, we have patterns of being with other people, some people. And we have different patterns of being with other people. And that makes us stuck.
Exactly. And that's what Jean calls structure bound. And everything that Jean is saying about therapy, of course, is about all of our relationships. We're pinpointing therapy because we want to be very aware in this role of being of service to the big therapy process, right?
But can we be if we have no structure, there's a danger. And if we have a lot of structure, there's also a danger.
Absolutely.
So how do we be this Zelig-like person that can be with everybody? We can't be with everybody. We can't change our personality back and forth like that.
Right. That's the $64,000 question. I always laugh when I say that, because $64,000 isn't very much money now. But but that's the big question. How can we be the interaction that brings things alive? And
Lynn, I had my hand up. I just wanted to ask you a question about structure bound.
Yes.
What does Jean mean when he says structure bound?
Well, it's like what Marvin is talking about. It's stuck in a pattern.
In a pattern.
In a pattern, right? I mean, structure bound is when something can't be spontaneous or free, and it's not accessible to all of the implicit richness. It gets cut off, and it's like this solid thing. And certain experiences can be that way. Certain trauma that way.
Is that part of the explicit, the structure from the explicit, from the outside?
Sometimes it can be explicitly. For example, some kinds of client-centered therapy have sort of rules about don't say anything that puts something new in there. And that might be a structure that's sort of binding you, or I think of social situations where the structure is you only talk about the nice things, the weather. There's so many things you can't say what those things are. It's in the structure of that social situation.
Well, I think what Marvin said, we need the structure, but we have to know how to modify and play with the structure and shift it a little bit so it doesn't become too rigid.
Right. Jean is not at all saying that we don't have structures. Structures are
necessary.
are necessary for everything, but to be bound in them. I think we need to, that word bound is like tied up. And from Jean's point of view, that's what the problem is.
Well, we can't let focusing be a part of that structure bound experience. The focusing itself can become structure bound.
Absolutely. Yes, exactly right. The focusing itself can be an instance of structure bound. And Jean is always very careful not to make focusing a structure bound thing that you have to do it or you have to do it a certain way.
Certain way.
Right. He always says that in terms of priority, the relationship and the way you're relating comes first. And what the client is trying to communicate comes second. And focusing is only third in priority. Focusing meaning that moment of touching in. If that what we associate with focusing comes after an alive relationship of being curious and interested in our relating and what we're talking about, and then the touching in and having a pause and finding the right words and images would come after that.
Thank you.
I would like to add something that helps me to stay with that fluidity is that if I'm the interaction that can make a difference in the moment with the client, their interaction with me is making a difference and change in me. And when I stay in touch with, in a sense, the healing or the information or the process that their reaction is moving in me, I'm much less likely to maintain the rigidity.
Absolutely, yes, exactly. To be aware, and I think that's where the theory is so helpful, to be aware that we are the interaction and that this interaction is the manner of experiencing is what's important. And I wanted to say to you, Marvin, that often it's only when I feel the structure bound, when I feel the pattern taking over, that then I can want to break out of it and want to be a different way and try it out and see what happens.